Did X-Men Dark Phoenix deliver, or did the studio's last attempt on making a good movie about mutants seal its fate? Our fantasy cast on X-Men Dark Phoenix is next.
Did you hear what the kids are calling you? Phoenix.
Hello, Jean.
Who are you?
The better question is, who are you?
Something's happening to me. When I lose control, bad things happen. But it feels good.
Welcome back to Fantasy Picks Movie Edition. I am your host, Robert Moda, and with me today, I have Mark Kirkman from Panels to Pixel.
Hello.
And we have Frank all the way from sunny Florida.
Hello.
All right, guys. So how's everything going with you guys? Good?
Doing all right.
All right.
Doing good.
Good. Today we're going to be covering X-Men Dark Phoenix, which this movie was interesting, but it's also based off of the actual story from X-Men, the
Dark Phoenix.
The Dark Phoenix saga, because it's interesting how they took the Phoenix saga and the Dark Phoenix saga and they kind of merged it into one movie.
They just jumped.
Yeah, it was such a big jump,
Yes.
but the one thing, and this is the one thing I love about the X-Men. I mean, the X-Men, of course, are created by Stan Lee, and I believe it was Jack Kirby also.
Yes.
The X-Men created, but then once they came out with the new X-Men, where Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, that's where I really feel like the X-Men really took off.
Well, more or less like the Claremont years, like from 1975 to 1990s, early 90s.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that was the Claremont era, and as well as John Byrne years. And
yeah,
it really put the quote unquote new X-Men into light, because the new X-Men, as we all know, like Wolverine and Colossus and a whole bunch of others, Banshee was in there too.
Right.
That was the introduction of a new X-Men. They were trying to change a little bit because all they had was the original, and they're trying to retire them. But he gave these new characters and the new versions that came into it, like with Kitty Pryde, Aurora, gave them more character, in-depth, like more social issues in comparison to the original X-Men that we didn't get, because the original ones were done in the 60s, the early 60s.
Right.
What really social issues did they really deal with half the time?
Well, there was some, but I mean, the X-Men really were created due to the fact that they got tired of stories of where in the origins, they always had to invent some kind of
enemy.
Well, no, not enemy, like some kind of way, some kind of way on how these characters got their powers. So, Peter Parker getting bitten by a spider.
Yeah.
And then you got, and so on. So at some point they got tired of it and said, you know what, let's just say that they were born with these powers. And that's where the whole, genetic, the X gene came about and things like that. But I think like for me, one of the big reasons I got into the X-Men, and honestly, the biggest reason I got into the X-Men was because of the Wolverine miniseries that was done by Frank Miller. And it was
it the first one?
The 4-issue one. That
the art was by Bill Sankovich.
No, this is the Frank Miller one I'm talking about.
Oh, the Frank Miller, yeah.
Okay. So the Frank Miller one is the one where Wolverine's in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so, I love the character. I love the depth of the character. And I say, okay, now I got to check out the X-Men. And the X-Men really touched upon things like us in life and, with all the social stuff happening. So everything from racism, everything from how people view a different kind of class of people, in our world. And I found that very interesting because of everything, of course, that's going on in the real world. And even to this day, it's kind of relates to it a lot. So that's one of the things that I really liked about that. I liked that each one of the characters, there was so much depth to the character. There was so much story behind those characters, so, and they were all very flawed characters. That's what I liked about that too. So, but at the same time, they just had some of the coolest powers, and and they had some
Right.
of the coolest things that they did. But it was something where you felt like, hey, man, I could be a part of that group because I feel like an outcast, kind of thing. So that's the reason I liked it. I mean, what I don't know, how did you guys feel about the X-Men and what it meant to you in your lives?
The actual first issue of the X Men that I ever bought
Uh huh.
was X Men 137, which is the double issue where they go to the moon to fight for Phoenix.
Oh, cool.
That was the very first episode, and I bought it. I was with Anthony in New Jersey. Walked into like a 7-Eleven, and I saw just the cover, John Burns art, and I was like, "Whoa, this is interesting. I have to get this." And
What
after
what
that,
what
I
number
was just
number
hooked.
was that? 137?
137.
137. Wow. Well, you must have paid 50 cents for that.
It's cheap.
Back
was like,
then,
what,
off the
80?
rack, it was
No.
50 cents.
Yeah, it was off the rack.
75 cents.
No, 75 cents didn't happen until the later 80s.
I'm
This
looking at
is-
I'm looking at the actual
Right.
cover right now, and it says 75 cents.
Yeah,
Are you
it's a
talking?
double issue. It's a double issue.
It's a double issue.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's a
okay.
double
Yeah.
issue. So that's
Oh,
a
yeah.
very famous cover because you got Cyclops and you have Jean Grey
Oh, man.
using their powers, and they look like they're in the moon because you have the Earth in the background and stuff like that. But
Huh.
yeah,
And
no,
that-
that was awesome.
That image grabbed me. Like, oh wow, they look like they're really caught up in something. I need to get into this book. Up until now, I'm pretty much DC because Anthony, anything that he was no longer reading or that was old, or he'd give it to me because I didn't care what it was shape it was in. I just wanted to read it.
Right.
So it's mostly DC stuff.
Yeah, I always felt like the DC stuff. I was never that much into the DC stuff, but I like the reason I always liked Marvel was because one, it was based in the real world, and what I mean by that in Manhattan.
Right.
It was like the superhero capital of the world was Manhattan, and every time they showed something, it was like, oh yeah, Spidey's over here in 57th Street, or Doctor Strange is it lives in this area, and you could actually almost feel like, man, maybe if I actually go there, I could see it, kind of thing. But I always felt like the X-Men were, hey, they're in Westchester, which is cool. But I always felt like there was just an interesting thing about their characters just seemed so flawed. And sometimes you could relate to each one, where some of the DC ones, I never felt that way with.
I was always a Marvel fan, always will be. I gear more towards that, though I do read a lot of DC in comparison. Frank Miller is always something that I always loved, as well as Bernie Wrightson kind of material that's out there. I always loved Swamp Thing, but I always geared more towards like Spider-Man. Spider-Man is my favorite, superhero overall.
Right.
But as far as groups, I didn't lean towards the Avengers when it first came out. And all that stuff when I started getting into it. I started getting into comics in, I would say, more or less around 81, 82. And I would get back issues, and I didn't invariably get stuff off of the rack, but there's a few that I cherished in knowledge and remembering. The first one I can remember that I got from X-Men that I really had to have because I thought it was such a cool cover is from 1983, which was issue number 176, which was 60 cents off the rack at a newsstand. And I had my regimen of things because, you get your allowance and you spend it when you're a little kid, if you're like between the ages of 9 and 10. So I found myself gearing more towards X-Men because of the characters themselves, the relationships. I always loved that whole Scott, Jean, and Logan threesome. And as years go by, and as I'm in my, I would say 30s at the point when True Blood came out, it just reminded me of Bill, Eric, and Sookie in True Blood.
Ooh, nice. I like that.
Trifecta. So, because Jean was kind of a tease.
Right.
And I just love that whole aspect. And I love that each character had their own, they grew up with their own power. They only had one power. But the funny thing is like by the time Gambit showed up, I'm like, there's a lot of people that have crappy powers out there. You know, look at Caliban.
Yeah.
You know,
Caliban, yeah.
yeah, Caliban. He can only smell and sniff out other mutants, and he looks
Or
disgusting.
Cypher.
Or even Gambit. Gambit, look, he can only light things up. He actually has to have physical things to hold on to, light them up to throw at people.
Yeah, but a lot of people like
What's he
Gambit because one, the character is kind of like, he's from Louisiana, and of course he has that Louisiana, accent, or that what they call the Creole accent or something like
Yeah.
that. And that's the reason I think they like it. And also the fact that yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool the fact that he can actually energize, playing cards and throw it to people. It's not bad. The one thing I've always noticed with mutants is that not all mutants will have, all these great powers or whatever it is, or cool powers. Some of them are just like physically just look different.
Yes.
So as a matter of fact, I remember one time they actually did a contest, and they told readers, hey, if you could come up with a cool power, what will you do? And they made this contest where they picked the coolest one, and the one that actually won, which is actually done by a artist that I always loved, Art Adams. His name was Alchemy, and his power was the fact that he will touch things and they just turned into gold. And I was like, well, son of a bitch, why can't I do that? But so that was his power, and they just decided, I guess that was the best power to do, so but they did a cool story behind that when it was the Art Adam years, what I call the Art Adam years. But yeah, no, I mean, I think always the X-Men are pretty cool. I mean, they've had some really cool events, again, like the one that we were talking about today, the Phoenix Saga. But they also had other ones, they had the Apocalypse one, which of course, they did as a movie, and they completely screwed that one up too.
Yeah, it looked like Power Rangers, or the enemy from Power Rangers. I forget his name.
Yeah, what was it?
Zordon.
Was it
No,
Zordon?
not Zordon. Zordon's the other one. Because it's Rita Repulsa is the first villain.
Yeah.
In
Right.
Power Rangers.
But they made Oscar Isaac look like this, like cool
it was
purpley
horrible. Zed or something. Yeah.
The whole intro was probably like the very beginning of the movie is what always I really love. I don't know why. It's like I said this to Rob the other day when we were talking about Wonder Woman 1984. The best part of it is what Patty Jenkins was told to leave out, which was all the Themyscira stuff. Well, in this, it's like the whole very beginning of how Apocalypse was able to siphon all these powers, and it was all about Egypt, and we were teased that from Days of Future Past. Right. And I was like, oh, I can't believe we're going to get this. It'd be so awesome. And then we get this, and then we get this kind of goofy guy. It was like kind of
trust me. I mean, I'm going to cover that one in another episode one day, but because there's so much to cover on that one, which I'm going to have a really good time. But so those major events. So here's the great thing about, I think, the X-Men. So the X-Men went through its like stages, I think, when Stan Lee and Kirby did it. I mean, they were really cool, and and they had like these cool powers, but their stories were pretty much mainstream, like any Marvel,
they had a villain of the issue.
Yeah, and they did introduce Magneto, and they introduced all these other villains that they had. One actual X-Men that I always liked that they never really what I would say expanded on was his name was Mimic.
Yep, I was just going to say that.
Yeah, he can mimic other people's mutant powers, and I thought that was really cool. And I just never know. I guess because Rogue can actually do something like that now.
Rogue can borrow people's.
Rogue has to touch people, while Mimic just has to be in their vicinity.
Yes.
Right. And, so, which I thought was cool.
Actually, they kind of did that with Heroes.
Yeah, they did.
TV show Heroes, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Silent.
So they come, so I always think that up until Chris Claremont and John Byrne took over, that's when the X-Men really became interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they had so much depth to it. And then, of course, John Byrne's art which was so great back then.
Mhm.
He was just considered one of the best artists out there. He portrayed them and he drew them in such a way that they would just every time you open the pages, you just kind of saw, wow, this is just looks so damn cool. But before that, the X-Men I don't think were as interesting. I mean, they were still a really cool group, but like I said, as soon as Chris Claremont took over it, I mean, Chris Claremont I think is the one that definitively made the X-Men what they are now.
He grabbed every kid known to man at that point and
Right.
branded the culture of the X-Men, where it was, if you talked about a comic, the first thing they would say, X-Men.
Right.
And then on top of that, elaborated more on Wolverine, because before X-Men, the only time we ever saw Wolverine was in an Incredible Hulk 184.
Right.
Or was it
Right.
184 or 183
I'm pretty
issue?
sure it's 184. I think
Yeah.
it's both.
It's at
Might-
the end, 183 going into 184. And that was the last we ever saw of him.
Right.
And then on top of that, through the X-Men and Wolverine, we got other groups that are the Canadian Avengers, Alpha Flight. So
Right.
we were able to get more of that, and Claremont actually worked on that a little bit as well. And
Vern
I just love that these aspects of these characters too, because those characters, they actually in Alpha Flight, they actually were able to introduce the first gay superhero. And that was another thing that they touched on, and that's the difference between Marvel and DC. They're able to do these kind of realistic and social issues
Right.
that we get, and X-Men elaborated more on that. It stemmed from the idea too at a certain point where they talked, it was in the late 70s, early 80s. They had a graphic novel, and it was all about literally it's about Magneto's history that we actually saw in the Bryan Singer version in the very beginning, him in prison, and about Nazi Germany. And then on top of that, the story segues into that, not the history of Magneto or Eric Lenscher, but they talk about discrimination in the
Correct.
world. So it kind of goes into more of
Is that,
racism.
God loves.
or
Yeah.
so that was such an excellent. It was like an oversized.
It was an oversized graphic novel, and I
Right,
bought it
correct.
right off the rack too when it came out.
I remember
Still have
that,
it.
and it was great. I mean, it was amazing how they were, it was talking about religion. It was talking about like the X-Men and how they feel like mutants are, again, it's like the religious establishments of just looking at a certain group and saying, well, they're not part of God because it's not in man's image and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where, we get a lot of those kind of things. And even nowadays, with all these, different, social groups and all these different variations on, who we are, with our identity and things like that. So, yeah, no, I thought that was excellent. And it was and that's where actually the first time they introduced Stryker, I believe.
Yes.
Was in that novel.
Mhm.
So, yeah, no, I mean, so I always thought the way the X-Men were made, I think it was such a unique idea, but it was also an idea that just made comic books just a lot more fun to read. But what's unfortunate is, so when the X-Men came out, of course, they came out with the first X-Men movie that was done by Bryan Singer. And it's honestly one of the movies that I would say that is credited with just really making superheroes actually, be able to be on the screen.
Yes.
In the past, we had either Superman, we had maybe Batman, and stuff like that. Like I always felt like DC was the only one that made movies that actually worked at that time. Our version of Fantastic Four was horrible. Our version of The Punisher was horrible. Our version of, Captain America was horrible. Spider-Man was horrible. I mean, these things, like especially Spider-Man, like the TV show, which don't get me wrong, I used to sit there and watch it. But when he had like the web shooters and you could see that.
Oh, you're talking about the one with Nicholas Hammond.
Yep, Nick
with
Hammond.
the big bracelets and stuff like that. You're
1977
like,
to 1978. We were there as kids. That's all we had.
It's
It's
all
so
we
obviously
had.
a rope.
Well, also we had the Electric Company where he didn't speak.
Yeah, exactly. He never spoke.
And then we had Captain America, where he always had a motorcycle helmet all the time.
Yep.
And he had the shield, like it was a plastic looking shield in front of like the motorcycle.
But the motorcycle came out of the van. It was so cool.
Yeah. So, but like when it came to movies, we really didn't have a movie that I could say Marvel that really did well. And then the X-Men came out. And
No, well, there
that,
was one more before the X-Men came out, honestly.
Which is?
It was produced by George Lucas. And it didn't do well in the theater, but it was the first unofficial but official Marvel movie that came out in 1986. It is
my goodness.
Oh God.
Howard the Duck.
I got a problem with a woman who's in a fucking bed with a duck. All right. That is just some horrible bestiality there happening.
Well, I'd like to be in bed with her. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, but I'm sure anybody would, but nobody wants to be in bed with a duck.
I'd like to be the duck.
But actually, so correct me if I'm wrong. Which one came out first? Was it X-Men or Blade?
Blade
came out first.
Blade was another unofficial that came out.
Correct.
And it was marketed as more of horror and action.
Right. It wasn't marketed as a
Marvel.
superhero Marvel kind of thing, even though it says, that it was,
based on a Marvel comic.
Based on a Marvel comic book. But that was and a lot of people actually give Blade really the credit for Marvel hitting it off, with a good movie finally. But the X-Men were really the superhero group that people always thought, how the hell are you going to get this superhero group on the screen? Because if you look at their outfits in the comic book, they're just, they work in the pages, but they wouldn't work in film. So they put them all in, black leather. But it still works.
We've changed that over the years. If you think about it, we're leaning more and more to these extravagant costumes that we grew up in looking at them in comics. That's why everybody's waiting Deadpool 3, because we want to see Hugh Jackman with the yellow and blue, with the claw, everything that we get. I love that costume in itself. A lot of people like the yellow and brown, but to me, we're getting that slowly more and more, where they're not afraid, because it used to be like when Stanley used to go to certain parties and things like that, and there were people that are real writers, and they would be like, he would say, yeah, I'm in books. He wouldn't say exactly what they were, because his wife would be like, please don't say you. They'll say, oh, you write the funny books at the very end, because people, that it's that stigma of that whole, because I think, the way the cinematic world views the whole comic book lore or adaptation is that it's silly to have these costumes and everything. Correct. And now it's like, oh, okay, we're getting to that where everybody's a nerd, everybody's a geek, everybody's going to a convention, your mom, your pop, everybody. And it's like, it's okay. Hold on. My dad, who's 50 something, is cosplaying. He's the Mandalorian, and he's got the new baby now in his arms, and that's Grogu. But it's okay to have these things which are pretty cool that are costumey in the movies, which I'm starting to love more and more. Deadpool at that point, dead on accurate with the costume and how he's supposed to look. I think that was like the first time we got an exact. That's it. That's Deadpool. We know who it is, and thank you, Ryan Reynolds and Mark Miller, to actually give us that, because now I think that's where, in the direction that we're going, where we're getting what we want. Finally.
You were going to say, Frank?
I'm saying it. Even today, we still get filmmakers, supposedly like the filmmakers, who are crapping on comics or crapping on the movies specifically. Martin Scorsese point out,
yeah, that's true.
He doesn't look at it and say, "Oh, it's destroying our business." It doesn't.
It's taking the money out of his pocket. Is literally what it's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, I just think that, so superhero movies,
it's entertainment.
when and it's interesting how you see the evolution of superhero movies. So, like we said, the X-Men, everybody was in black, leather and things like that. But as these movies all of a sudden start to, evolve, I think costume designers started finding ways to say, okay, let me see how I could really translate what's in the comic books out into the movies, but it doesn't have to be exactly like in the comic books. It's just going to probably be an enhanced version of that. So that's why when you look at all
sense,
that makes sense. So when you look at all these costumes, and you got to look, I mean, material science and different types of way of fabric manufacturing and all these things have allowed these costume designers to really make some amazing costumes for film, which we probably did not have back when, the X-Men first came out.
It starts realistically with Batman. The Tim Burton Batman, they make this suit and they specifically say, like, this suit is bulletproof. It's made with this special material that,
Right. But for Michael Keaton, what they did was they actually molded his body in order to actually have, while I don't think the X-Men, they did that. They probably, of course, they took measurements, stuff like that. But nowadays, everything is like, okay, everybody gets 3D scanned. Everybody gets, they design these costumes in the computer and stuff like that. And then they say, okay, how do we translate this? What materials do we have to use? And a lot of these, let me tell you, a lot of these actors are like, I am so happy I don't have to wear that costume anymore. But it looks great on film. And so I'm very, very eagerly awaiting the new X-Men from the MCU to see how that's going to be translated. Because I'm hoping it really does get a really good representation of what we see on the pages. So with the X-Men, you had the first X-Men, which was a huge hit. You had the second X-Men, I believe it was X-Men, well, they call it X-Men 2, but
X2,
did they have
X-Men United?
Yeah. Is it X-Men United, which was the first time we see Colossus.
Right.
Right. So
and Nightcrawler.
For like 2 seconds.
Right, exactly. And then we had X-Men Last Stand, which basically was the Phoenix Saga. It was the first attempt at this Phoenix Saga. And then from that we had basically a reboot with First Class.
Yeah.
Right. And then this from First Class it went to Days of Future Past, which, let me tell you, to this day, one of the best X-Men movie from all of them. I was just watching it and I was actually really, really sucked in, going, wow, this movie was just amazing.
The director's cut is amazing too.
The road cut is really good, or Rogue's cut or something like that. So I remember buying both. And then, of course, we had Apocalypse, which that was the one thing everybody was waiting for. It's like, when are we going to get Apocalypse? When are we going to get Apocalypse? And when we finally got it, we're like, why did we get Apocalypse? Why did we get Apocalypse? Because you're like, what the was that?
What did we do?
I didn't want a Saturday morning cartoon visualized as what it is. I mean, did AI make this?
Exactly. And the first thing, because even back then, having a CG character was probably going to be very difficult compared to the way it is now. Because we got Thanos, and Thanos is all CG, and you know what? Thanos only works that way. The Hulk only works in CG, when you have such a big character. So when you have Apocalypse, which is supposed to be huge, that's what we all wanted. Was like, all right, make him CG because he's supposed to be huge. Instead, we got somebody that looked like Ivan Ooze from the Power Rangers. And the first scene that we get, he's purple. And we're like, what are you doing? And it's like, I could not believe that was the first image that they threw out to fans out there. And everybody people just wanted to
hated on it before the movie came out. They
shitted on it so bad that from what I hear, they did a lot of, color corrections and things like that to me. But that movie just do anything. That movie just still was horrible. And then, of course, we get the Dark Phoenix, which everybody was always hoping, all right, when are we going to get Dark Phoenix? Because obviously Apocalypse didn't work.
And Last
And then
Stand
we
was a
got,
crappy version of it.
yeah, and then we got this movie, which is the one that we're reviewing today. So the one we're reviewing today, the plot, according to the plot, is in 1975, 8-year-old Jean Grey is orphaned in a car crash. Professor Xavier brings her to his school for the gifted youngsters, promising to teach her to control her mutant abilities. In 1992, during a rescue mission to have space shuttle, to save space shuttle astronauts from a doomed mission, Jean is hit by an energy source, which causes her abilities to run out of control and having her become the Phoenix. So, here's my thing on that.
Okay.
When we last saw Jean,
we did get the Phoenix out of it the last time we saw
exactly.
her.
When we last saw Jean,
everybody forgets that.
In the last part, she became the Phoenix. And I mean, we're talking about, you see a giant fiery bird,
behind her.
And so how is it that this all of a sudden caused her to be the Phoenix when she was already the Phoenix? Go ahead.
But in the beginning of the movie, her power is manifesting heat. She's burning things off the wall.
Right.
And everybody's afraid of her because of her power. And that's the Phoenix.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just one of those things which did not make sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
At all. I think, and let me tell you, for whoever's listening to this, just know that there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this if you haven't already figured it out.
Oh, oops.
You don't even have to watch the movie, listeners. You just have to listen to us and talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. But the choices they made, one of them was to basically kill Mystique, which I was actually like, what? Okay, that there's a new one. I also think, I will say this. I think like I think Nightcrawler was somewhat portrayed, pretty decent.
Yeah,
but
I think both versions that we got between the Singer version and this one, we got literally what we wanted out of Nightcrawler. It's just that the character wasn't elaborated as much like we got in the comics. We don't get little pirate Kurt Wagner.
Yeah, and the thing is that, right, like, Nightcrawler is actually a swashbuckler because he considers himself that way, in the comic books, right, with the sword and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you don't really see that part of him. But not only that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I am wrong, but in Apocalypse, didn't he have a German accent, and on this one he didn't?
Yeah,
he did have a German accent.
Yeah,
on Dark Phoenix, he had a German accent.
Because when Rachel, no, not in Dark Phoenix,
not in Dark Phoenix.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, he's been in America too long by then. That's why.
Oh, so excuse me.
He's been hanging out with Jubilee.
The 90s now, so he's got to have an American. He's got to be Americanized.
So
it's kind of like Wanda. If you think about it, Wanda Maximoff didn't have her Sicilian accent, and then we wind out in WandaVision. It's like, oh, she was just putting that on that American accent.
Oh yeah, those are little things that, even though I love the MCU, those are the little things that you're like, okay, moving on.
But they were able to explain it in just like 2 sentences. Yeah. Oh, I put that accent on. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like moving on, but. Yeah, so one of the things that, so I don't know. So I just felt like this movie, first of all, I didn't care for any of the characters. And that's the part that really broke my heart on this movie, because it's like, first of all, I think like Sophie Turner, beautiful, absolutely beautiful woman.
Yes.
And I think, especially in her last season of Game of Thrones, that's when you saw the grown-up version of her, and I was like, well, hello there. but so, and they made her, she has this one thing, she has like this very sexy look with her eyes and stuff. So I think as that character, sure, but she herself as an actress, I don't think she knew how to portray who Jean Grey really is in the comic books.
She didn't make it as sympathetic in the
Doesn't what?
comic. Like, yeah, Sophie Turner. I'm not putting her down.
No, not at all. Me
I
either.
give it to you. Like, I agree with you. I think she was given the source material. She wasn't given as much time to like devote to it
Correct.
because it was in between Game of Thrones. If you think about it,
Right.
these are projects in between, and on top of that, they're with an actor or an actress or whatever you want to call them, auteur. They have their time where they have to get into the character role, and this is only like her second stance to the point of actually playing that character, idealistically.
Right.
And she had, you could see where she was going with the Jean Grey. You could feel a little bit of it. Now, mind you, Famke Janssen, when she was playing Jean Grey, I kind of felt it a little bit, but
Right.
she was a little bit too much of an aggressive Jean Grey, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I think Famke Jensen, I don't know. I think she portrayed that character very well, according to like when you look at the comic. But a lot of people always thought that Famke Jensen just did a really good job when it came to Jean Grey herself.
Yeah.
It was just something of a portrayal that you saw. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, I believe her. Sophie just kind of looked too innocent at one point, and then she all of a sudden took that dark persona
and jumped.
It just, because in the comic books, in order for her to go into the Dark Phoenix, it took 3 years for her to become the Dark Phoenix.
Correct.
Compared to this movie where she becomes the Dark Phoenix in one
overnight.
Day. So for you to see that change, because I think with the first 3 movies, you kind of knew where Jean Grey was going. You knew that in the first X-Men, I don't think they touched upon that a lot, but I know in the second one they did, where I know like Xavier was like, she was trying to control her powers and things like that, and then on the third one, that's when she went, so you kind of saw at least a little bit
of a transition, but
right. Yeah,
it's
and
as
it's
if they said to her, it's like, here, you don't have any Midol. You're literally on it's that time of the month, so
oh my god,
just act like that,
man.
the really biggest bitch that you could possibly be. But
the way it was played,
the way it was played though is to the excess, but honestly kind of did work out. I know I went there, sorry.
It's all
oh man, that was interesting. If you need to write to Mark Kirkman, go ahead.
Shut up, man. I already got bad press. It's okay.
But yeah, no, it's just I just felt like, and again, I think Sophie Turner's I would say a very
actress.
She's a
really
good actress.
Yeah.
I liked her in Game of Thrones. I thought she did phenomenal there. Yeah. And I when they said that she was going to be, the Phoenix, I was like, all right, we'll definitely take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she convinced me when it came to, to her. But that being said, so here's all the things that I think are different. Like, the one thing is there's so many things different from the comic books to the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So Phoenix was introduced in in Uncanny X-Men 101 and ran through all the way through 108. But Dark Phoenix came out on 129 and went all the way through 138. So that gave it about 3 years of that. And that's what I was saying, but the roster was also different. So in the movie, it's Jean Grey, Beast, Quicksilver, Storm, Mystique, Nightcrawler, Cyclops, and Professor X. But in the comic books, we got Jean Grey, Cyclops, Storm, Nightcrawler, Colossus, which I think the best portrayal of Colossus has been the one in Deadpool. I thought that was just phenomenal there. Yeah. Wolverine, Banshee, and Professor X.
A walking Professor X too.
Huh?
A walking Professor X too. Because by then the Shi'uri, with him being in space, he could walk.
Oh, well, the Shi'ar, gave him that ability. But he was always on Earth. He was always wheelchair bound, I guess.
He was wheelchair bound. But he didn't want to go back to Earth because he was like, I could walk.
Yeah. So,
and that's why they spent a lot of time there too. Right. And that's how her Phoenix that's when the Phoenix visited her, because I don't know if you want to go over how the Phoenix is, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you probably have a
Oh,
better story about it, but my what I recall out of it, it was a mystical being, a Nexus level being that kind of inherited got involved into Jean's life because it spoke to her from a dead friend, like a friend who died when she was young that she was closely attached to. There was hindrances, like they kind of segued to the idea of like she was in love with her, and then kind of fulfilled that long loss, that loss of someone, and preyed on her empathy. And it's kind of like a symbiote in a sense that the power got involved within her, but it could go good or bad. And then in this case, in the very beginning, it went good. It was like enhancing her abilities 100%,
Right.
tenfold. And then when it got triggered as being inside her, it became the Dark Phoenix in a sense of, wow, you're starting to feel, wow, this is a Nexus level being to the point where I'm going to destroy everything.
Right.
And that's literally what had happened is that while they were in space, while they were on Earth, there were these events that happened within Jean where she was pulled to extremes emotionally, and it just pulled out to the point where that's where Dark Phoenix came out.
Right. I just think that for a movie to so here's my problem with the movie, right? So, and I think at that time, and this is a fault from Fox, because Fox just does not know how to make fucking movies sometimes.
Well, it's like Sony too. They don't know how to do Spider-Man movies.
Yeah,
they have to get Kevin Feige.
So what? Yeah, exactly. So I think what happened was, they should have somehow said, okay, if we're gonna do Apocalypse and Phoenix has to come first because you have to build it the way. I mean, if you build it the way the comic books did, which is one, there was no Shi'ar Empire, which is in the comic books.
Yep. Right.
So you have to kind of somewhat introduce that, right?
Correct.
And that probably has to be done over the course of just one movie alone.
Well, we could do that. They could still do that because right now we're in that whole space version of Marvel.
Right now with Marvel, but I'm saying within the Fox era, they just didn't know because according to like the writer, he just did not want to use certain things from another movie to bring into this movie. And I'm like, Marvel does it all the time. So why wouldn't you just introduce, like, honestly, like the Hellfire Club? The Hellfire Club, first of all, the Hellfire Club was introduced into
First class.
First class.
First class. Yeah.
Yep. Kevin
Wrong
Bacon.
way. It was just a horrible
Yep.
introduction to the Hellfire Club. But they could have bought the Hellfire Club into, Dark Phoenix because it's the Hellfire Club that turned Jean from
good girl, goody two shoes,
the good girl to like being the Dark Phoenix because she wanted more and more.
And then she got brainwashed by Sebastian and the rest of them. That were part of the
Mastermind.
Club.
It was Mastermind. What was
Sebastian Shaw?
No, Sebastian Shaw is not Mastermind.
Yeah, but Sebastian Shaw was in charge of it at that time.
Right, but the Mastermind, I forgot what the name of the character is, or the human character is, but he's the one that made her think that she was like in a Victorian age and all this stuff, and that she was, married to, this really, so, and made her want more extravagant things and more power and things like that. And that's how I guess the Dark Phoenix or the Phoenix got corrupted to be darker and stuff like that.
Manipulated.
But right. But so the Shi'ar was not in there, which I think they should have been introduced in an earlier movie. If they wanted to, I think Dark Phoenix should have been a huge mega event level thing that led to like, hey, we have all these different movies and it leads to the Dark Phoenix, which could have been huge. Because one, Wolverine should have been in this movie because in the original story, Wolverine has a huge, I guess, a huge part when it comes to, in the comic books with that. You also have Beast also had a major role in the movie, but in the comics, he didn't show up until the very end of the saga. So I don't know why Beast, but then again, Beast was been there. And we'll talk about Beast in a moment.
It's because of contracts, Rob. That's what it was.
Yeah. The Skrulls and the Supreme Intelligence of the Kree were in the
Kree.
comic. You know, Fox didn't have the rights to those characters at the time, so that's one of the reasons they didn't, really use them.
But they could bypass it, and that's
Right.
the whole. That's
And then
what
the
they did.
Shi'ar, and honestly, the Shi'ar were actually replaced by the Dabari in the movie.
Yeah.
So
They just renamed it, and made it something else.
They made it something else,
but they
stuff
made
like
them evil in a sense. The Shi'ar was not. If you look at the storyline and the story arc of the Shi'ar in the comics, they weren't evil at all.
No, but they were trying to determine the right course when it came to the Phoenix. What would they do with the Phoenix, and what is it that because everybody was trying, because the Phoenix was like just such a cosmic level event where it's like, listen, this thing could destroy the universe, that all aliens were trying to figure out, what are we going to do with this? And that's why it led to the whole battle on the moon on the comic books with
because
go ahead.
Dark Phoenix actually destroys in the comic book the Dabari
Gout. Which is fine because they did the same thing here, but it was just, again, but there was so many other aliens involved. In this one, it's just the Dabari. And as a matter of fact, the character from the Shi'ar Empire, Lilandra.
Yeah, Lilandra.
Lilandra is her name.
Empress.
Which has like also a relationship with Professor X.
Yeah, it's where he's getting his nookie.
Yeah, exactly. He was getting his space nookies. She was also involved in this whole thing. So she's the one that explained to the X-Men what the Phoenix was.
Yes.
But in this movie, I guess they kind of took they took basically the Shi'ar Empire, the Skrulls, and the Dabari and all that stuff, and they just crammed them into just the Dabari. And Vuk is the name of the character that Jessica Chastain, portrays.
Yep.
Which I thought it was just a horrible way of doing it.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, it's okay, I guess. Another difference in the comic books and the movie is that Professor X retires as a dean of the school in the movie. So at the very end, he retires, and then Magneto invites him
tank in charge,
to live it with him in his his little mutant island. In the comic book, Cyclops is the one that quits the team. And Kitty Pryde is introduced as a new student.
Correct.
So these are all things that, again, I just think that the way if they really, don't get me wrong, I think Marvel, the MCU has taken origins and, kind of manipulated them enough where they work on film. But this one, it just felt like some place. It was right. It's all over the place, and it just felt like there's something missing. I mean, I should have been more like, holy shit, this woman is going to destroy the fucking universe. And instead, it was just more like, hey, this woman just has a temper tantrum with just a with the fiery bird in her, and that's it. And then I also think the way they kind of, the way that she kind of sacrificed herself was just, there was no heart. Like, I didn't feel anything. I was like, okay, she's gone.
Well, kind of sacrificed herself.
Kind of, but
kind of sacrificed herself, because at the end you see her.
Yeah, at the end you see the little, and she's like, flying around in the universe, or whatever it is. But so let's talk about the cast, because the cast, I think, is what also made this movie, I think, not as good as it should be, in my opinion. So Sophie Turner, again, great actress, but I didn't think she did the best portrayal of Jean Grey.
Okay.
Right. James McAvoy, I think, it's funny. I haven't seen these movies in a while, and I decided, let me see them. And I saw Dark Phoenix. And James McAvoy was just okay. I was like, I don't know, man. As Professor X, he just doesn't do anything for me. But then I went ahead and saw Days of Future Past, and I'm like, he was so fucking good in that.
Great. Well,
he was great, man. He was. I think
it had to do with the writing, the producer, and the director for that particular
fucker
film.
Who wrote, those movies, wrote this one. That's what really gets me. It's like,
he was off the drugs. He pulled a Robert Downey Jr. like Robert did for Chaplin. He had to get off the drugs.
Yeah, no. And then Michael Fassbender, what do you guys think about Michael Fassbender as Magneto? I have never been a fan. I mean, I like him as an actor. I truly do. I think he's great. I
He's a
just
great
never
actor.
been a fan of him being Magneto.
I always thought he kind of gave more of a respective kind of Magneto
Right.
of more gentlemanlike in some cases, even though he's far younger than Ian McKellen. But for the fact is, if you look at it, that McAvoy and Fassbender were put in these roles to mimic those two particular actors
Right.
and give those perspectives. I thought Fassbender was great. As far as like an evil version of Magneto, Days of Future Past, he did pretty good as far as like coming to that conclusion.
Right.
I'm forgetting which one. Oh, is this one? Because Jean actually comes to the island and he's trying to be more sympathetic with her and try to, and then the military shows up and I didn't even rewatch it. I'm going on memory, guys, but I'm just like, and I remembered that, and I was like, all right, he's trying at this point.
Right.
He's trying
That
to
island
be.
is supposed to be Kenosha.
Yeah,
Yes,
I know.
by the way, the fact that that's Genosha, and if you and for anybody out there, Genosha is supposed to be a mutant island that is supposed to be like some kind of technological wonder or something like that in the
Yeah,
comic
and it's
books.
just like a jungle kind
This
of.
is kind of like a
island.
jungle with like maybe some refugees on it, and that's what it made it seem like. And again, that's bad writing.
Rob, it
Really,
looked like
really
the scene-
laser.
Do you remember when we covered Umbrella Academy on my podcast and they had the fight and they had the original seven and
Yes.
it was during wartime. It looked like it was filmed in the same place.
Was it really?
It looked like it to me.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant yeah, it does. I mean, it does look that way. Go ahead, Frank.
So I actually did watch. I feel like I'm too close to the mic. I actually did watch Dark Phoenix again, and I was taking notes as I was doing it, and I
Did you
wrote
fall
down
asleep?
when I got to this part. No, I didn't actually. Magneto and his island of misfit
Toys.
mutants.
And that's exactly what that was.
Yeah, it is true.
It wasn't a very good portrayal. Don't even call it Genosha, because you know what?
Exactly.
That's a whole
Well, they
other
don't.
it's a whole other huge story
Yeah, it is.
that takes place in comic books, and for them to like just shrink it down to this little like little refugee island kind of thing just really sucked. But I always thought like Michael Fassbender, because there's a thing about Magneto can be this maniacal person, and at certain times in the comic books he exudes a certain power and respect, and at the same time fear. I never got that from Michael Fassbender. That did not translate very well when it came to Eaton, and I thought McKellen didn't do the same either. They did a certain portrayal of the character that was interesting, but I don't think it was like the same character like in the comic books, which in the comic books he's now more of an anti-hero, I think, compared to what he used to be. But I just think that
Plus it's tragic.
Yes,
He comes across more as tragic.
yeah, exactly. So the other one, I mean, Jennifer Lawrence, honestly, I always thought that she was the wrong person for Mystique.
She didn't want to be doing the movie anyway.
Towards the end, no, she didn't. If you notice, so like the first it was Rebecca Romaine, which she didn't even wear a bodysuit. That was actually just paint and applications in her entire body. And she was always naked in the set, right? So she wasn't afraid of that. We weren't afraid of it either, because we love looking at it as guys that we are, and fanboys and all that stuff. But Jennifer Lawrence then did a bodysuit, And then from a bodysuit, all she did was like, look, towards the end, you could tell she didn't want to be in that because all you saw was, first of all, a very light application on her face and a few little applications, and then the red wig. I feel like she was like, no, this is as far as I'm going to go. And it's like, I was like, that is not. And first of all, we all know that in the comic books, Mystique is actually the mother of Nightcrawler.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And that would have been such a great thing to explore in the movies, but that's something that they just never did.
They kind of hinted on that in the original X-Men movies, the way they had a conversation between Nightcrawler and Mystique, and how he goes, "Why don't you look like this forever?" And she was just like, "Oh, we shouldn't be afraid of who we are," which is pretty much the character of Mystique in itself, which Rebecca Romaine actually
but
properly.
we shouldn't be afraid of who we are. Can also mean it's like don't be afraid of being a mutant, because that's the whole thing about
but
don't be afraid of
love
being
that
yourself.
they could have
thing.
Yeah,
they could have expanded on it. Yes, they could have done that, but they never did, unfortunately. But I just never thought, like, Jennifer Lawrence just never came off as the character that I see in the comic books at all.
Not even in First Class for me. Honestly, I thought, oh, this is a different version. This is interesting in the very beginning. But also you have to realize that was one of the first few films that she had ever done. And then she was contractually obligated by Fox to do all these films. Like, if it made X amount of money, you have to do this film. Oh, you have to. And then Hunger Games came out. She blew up. Oh, she got an Oscar. Oh, I got an Oscar now, so I don't have to do this. And Fox is like, you got a contract. You have to do this.
I wonder if they sent her like the little how you call it, the little cartoon,
and she had to fulfill her obligation. So I think her renegotiation for this particular movie is like, just kill me off in the beginning of the freaking movie. And that's what they did.
That's probably what happened. I have a feeling that's exactly what happened. It's just she did not want to, and I think they said it. She did not want to be in this movie. She did not want to be Mystique.
You could tell in her acting she didn't want to be
she
there.
didn't. I mean, I'm sure now that the MCU is as big as they are, that she'll be like, "Hey, I'll play Mystique again." They're like, "Yeah, no,
nope. No, you're not getting Robert Downey Jr. checks. No, that's only RDJ."
No. Yeah, but Nicholas Hoult as Hank McCoy, the Beast. So here's my problem with this. When you look at the Beast in comic books, he's a huge hulking kind of person.
He's like a smart, intellectual.
He's an extremely smart, intellectual, but he's still a gigantic beast of a man.
Yes.
In this, first of all, we got Kelsey Grammer on the other ones, which was laughable. Okay, because while Kelsey Grammer sounds very, intellectual and stuff like that,
he just doesn't have the look.
The makeup has been so bad for Beast. When you look at Beast in the comic book, as a matter of fact, the Grant Morrison Beast shows a more feline look. I don't know if you ever noticed that he has more of a muzzle to it. I always thought that whiskers. Was a really cool look. But he also has the hind legs like an animal, and stuff like that, which I thought was cool. And, there's certain characters that I think that if you are going to do a huge, big budget X-Men, first of all,
CG.
Make the Beast CG and make them, and just have, if you want to have Kelsey Grammer on it, awesome. Let him just voice it. That's it. Just let him be the voice.
The other thing with that is that you have to remember that the original Beast was not blue and furry.
No.
He was just a big guy.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't until he started experimenting on himself and then
as an Avenger.
Yep. And
exactly. So I always thought, why didn't they start with that first? Because when you look at Nicholas Hoult, he looks like a regular guy, and then all of a sudden when he transformed was the funniest thing, because when I see him trying, I was like, he's just a skinny blue kid. That's all he looked like. He's a skinny, hairy blue kid. He does not look like the Beast. And I just, again, bad writing, that was bad art direction there.
I think he was too tall too, Nicholas Hoult.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Beast is huge too. I mean, he's not
No, I
a
meant on height.
Beast isn't tall. No.
is
Beast
it?
is like at least maybe 5'6", 5'7".
Not the way he's been portrayed lately. Lately,
No,
he's been portrayed pretty
Lately,
big.
yes.
Yes.
But if
lately
you
in the
go back to
film,
like,
As a matter of fact, I'm looking at a comic book right now, and he looks gigantic in this comic book.
oh, they made him bigger. Yeah,
Yeah, they
over the
made him
years.
bigger or something, which is fine by me. I don't care. I mean, like, make him big. You know, I think there's certain characters. I think Nightcrawler, honestly, make him CG. And the reason I say that is because it's so hard to portray because Nightcrawler only has 3 fingers. So
Right.
every actor that you see with those, you could tell that it's a big glove, as opposed to like the comic book where his hands are very slender and very
The
elongated,
fingers are very thin.
very thin and very elongated and stuff like that. And the same thing with his legs. The finger, like the toes, are also very elongated and stuff like that. And so there's just something very slim about him. So I think by having him in that CG version of him might actually work better. That's just me. But yeah, so Nicholas Hoult as the Beast. I mean, he's a good actor. I think Nicholas Holt's a very good actor. I just did not think,
Yeah.
for a moment, that he was this like smart, super intellectual, science guy. Which that's what Hank is. Hank is about science and everything, and he just didn't seem that way for this. I just think it's the writing at that point, but as portraying the Beast, and then this guy Ty Sheridan as Cyclops, no.
Yep.
He is nothing like
He's nothing like the Scott Summers that we would want from the comics.
What was he? Who was the
they've
original?
already screwed up. They've already screwed up Cyclops because they've made Havoc, who is supposed to be the younger brother, the older brother.
Yes,
And
They
Scott
just switched
is the younger brother.
Yep.
exactly. So, and of course, the origin of that was that they somehow both their powers manifested when they had to jump out of an airplane when their parents were trying to save them.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's where their powers manifested and stuff like that. So this has been kind of like a weird way to do things, but
yeah,
I just didn't think Ty Sheridan really like. Who was the original actor on the X-Men?
James Mars.
He
James
looked
Marsden,
looked a lot more like the Scott Summers that I know in the comics.
He had the look, but
he definitely had the look.
the way they wrote him, in my opinion, was a little bit off.
It was because Scott Summers now at this point, at least at this point, he is a master tactician when it comes to combat and all kinds of things like that.
Yeah.
And in this, he didn't even show that. He didn't even show like, first of all, Scott's supposed to be the leader of the X-Men.
Mhm.
And on this, they had Mystique. Like he was just kind of this chump on the side.
Yep.
Which I thought they really did a disservice to that character. Alexandra Shipp as Storm. I don't know what to say about her.
Honestly, I as soon as they introduced her in Apocalypse, I was like, okay, she looks like Storm with the mohawk and everything.
Yeah, but
She's got the look. She's got a bit of the attitude, and she could play it off because of like we got kind of that origin in that particular movie. So I kind of and she has the look, the way she talks. I'm thinking, okay, this is good, but
here's the question: what's her real origin? Because the way they made it seem that it was her origin was really more Middle Eastern, instead of being African,
African,
because
near Wakanda,
because her origin was supposed to be that they always thought of her as a goddess in her village.
Correct.
And in this, now she's just a thief.
Well, they kind of jumped the spark.
In the comic book, she's also
a thief when she was a little kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
When she was a little kid, yes.
But then
in her headdress in the comics, she carries lockpicks in her headdress.
That she had stolen. Yeah.
All right. Well, then I'm mistaken there.
But the thing is also that the look that we get out of her is from the Morlock version of Morlock leader.
And there's a deeper meaning to her mohawk in the comic book.
Right.
Than in the movies. Because in the comic book, Storm was always portrayed as just this very
quiet, long-haired
Arnable with this beautiful mane of white hair and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole tragic thing with the Morlocks what happened was all of a sudden she gets this mohawk, and everybody's just so shocked
Yeah.
at the different look that she has.
Correct. Yeah.
The mohawk actually happens in Japan
Does it
Really?
really?
because she
I don't
meets
remember that.
Yukio. She meets Yukio in Japan, and
I thought it
she
was the
redoes it.
Morlock. Well, so what was with the
No,
Morlock
she
then?
takes the look, the Caliban, the look,
Uh-huh.
not the Callisto.
Callisto.
Yeah.
She meets Callisto, and she's like, "Oh, I like your look," and then she starts dressing like Callisto and everything like that. But
Yeah.
the actual mohawk happens in Japan,
Oh,
and
okay.
she does that because she sees how carefree Yukio is, and she's got her short hair. She's
Right.
like, I want to make changes, and then she comes back. That's during the Paul Smith arc.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So
I forgot
there you
about
go.
that.
So yeah, no, I mean, I thought the Mohawk happened with the Morlocks or something like
I
that.
did too. I remember it
Yeah,
because she
at
did
least
go
that's
back
how
to
I
the
remember it,
Morlocks
but-
with the
right.
Mohawk.
Okay. I mean, but
Because she was
still,
trying to
it-
gain freedom for them at one
exactly.
point.
And there was, I mean, at least that had kind of a story behind it instead of just her just having the Mohawk. I think Holly Berry, when the X-Men was first coming out, everybody said who should play Storm, and everybody said Holly Berry should play Storm. I mean, because she is
She was
just
hot
a
at the time.
beautiful,
No.
beautiful woman of color that, you know, it's just like great portrayal of who the beautiful woman she is in the comic books.
Should have been Angela Bassett from the beginning.
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't see her as that.
I had that hope.
You don't think the way that she's portraying the Queen of Wakanda right now, she could
I
have done
like
Storm?
I like the way she's playing the Queen of Wakanda now, but you have to realize in the very beginning when the first X-Men came out, everybody asked me as a comic fan. I said Angela Bassett. The only reason why I state that, watch the movie Strange Days.
Oh yeah, seen it.
She was
She's good in
amazing
it.
in that,
She's great
and she
in it.
played a badass.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think she would have been perfect on the sweet side as well as that. So the transition with the white hair to a mohawk,
Right.
she could easily play that particular character.
Yeah,
But
it's just hard to
obviously now
it's
we
hard
can't
to
do that with
portray.
this movie.
It's hard to portray sometimes little things that meant so big in a comic book.
Yeah.
To try to all squeeze it into like 2 hours, you know, and
Or one
stuff like
movie.
that. Or one movie. It should really be
Well,
done.
that was the mistake.
That was the mistake.
Making
It
one
should have
movie.
been done over the course, because it shouldn't just be the story of Jean Grey. It shouldn't just be the story of, you know, Wolverine. It should also be the story of all the other characters on how they're, you know, they're going to change over time, and that just never happened, which is kind of sucks. So,
Well, the way that Marvel was able to do that, think about it. The Avengers came together as the Avengers.
Yep.
They had individual movies to basically form them. They at least had one particular movie each before the first Avengers movie came out.
right,
And it was introductions, yes, within the Avengers of other characters, but also introduced others that had a single film. Now,
Yeah.
I think Disney Marvel at one point were actually thinking of, hey, let's do this for hours for the X-Men, because how are we going to fit all these characters? But then they probably are realizing, crap, that's a lot of characters at this point. How could we do that? Well, if they were really smart, they could utilize, of all things, Disney Plus and put these particular shows, the Logan show, the Aurora show. The
yeah. I mean,
Colossus.
that would be something that you could do now, but we're talking about back then. There was no
Yeah.
Disney Plus, which
Yeah.
means that it would have to be done in a certain. I think just like, again, I think just Fox.
They just ruined it.
They just ruined it, but you know,
I actually thought of a way with using just Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, where they actually could have had most of the story in and still had a satisfying arc over those two films. So I think that if they'd have leaned into where Jean Grey is walking around the school and the students are afraid of her, along with the information that they provide as far as like her parents dying in the car crash, or supposedly the father dying along with the mother in the car crash,
right.
and her building on that trauma, and then getting to school where she's supposed to feel safe and everybody being afraid of her. So we could have actually had where the entity that goes into her that enhances the power of the Phoenix it's not the Phoenix Force, right? You could have said it's like some remnant of the power cosmic, like Galactus farted somewhere. And this was like floating around the galaxy, and it found its way to the Phoenix Force, and then it binds itself to it, and it increases her power and makes everybody afraid of her.
Galactus farts, and it creates a cosmic entity out of it.
Yeah,
All right.
It just goes around the galaxy.
Just comes out too.
And
And it's like you ever farted and it just lingers.
Yeah, don't walk there.
So that's what that is, right? It's like Galactus farts and then just lingers to like the Phoenix Force. It's like that's what it is.
Yeah, see, the Phoenix Force is like, hey, let's get together.
I don't know.
And
I
then
just
from there, you can,
that's
fix that story.
That's an interesting way of saying things. I think that we'll get to that part, and what way we would go on that. So the last three people that I would say, Evan Peters as Quicksilver. I think his portrayal of Quicksilver, first of all, I don't know if it's the same as the comic books, but he was charming enough in Days of Future Past, where the stuff that he was doing and how fat. Now, people like even physicists have said, first of all, he was going like 3 times or 4 times the speed of light, especially in this movie where he actually went in there, and as the explosion was going, he was able to go several times back and forth inside. That's faster than even the Flash, and the Flash is supposed to be the fastest character from any comic book or any, in all of comic book history. And he was going way faster than he was.
Meaning that Marvel was just like, no, we're making our Quicksilver faster than you, DC.
So, but it was just kind of like, it didn't make sense. Somebody actually told me, which actually makes it, it's like, listen, man, whenever you write something, one of the things that makes, so let's look into the whole story. One of the things that makes, like, let's say, Lord of the Rings work is because when Lord of the Rings was written, there are rules that you have to go by. There are certain stories and there are certain characters that cannot deviate from what they are, and you have to follow the rules within that universe in order for things to work. And that's why there are so many people that feel like Lord of the Rings always works when it comes to that. People who are actually trying to write these movies, they just don't get comic books. They could read them all they want. They could just, they could say, listen, I took like 17 graphic novels and I read everything. Well, good for you. Did you get it? Because there's still certain rules within that, even though it's fantasy, even though it's, they're doing all these fantastic things, but there's still certain rules that you got to follow in order for those characters to work the right way. And this is one of those areas where it's like somebody just said, hey, we're just going to make him so fast that he could beat the explosion. Like he was literally going 4 times the speed of light. That's how fast this man was going. And first of all, if you're pushing somebody at that speed, you will destroy them. All right. It's not just, hey, let me just nudge you. Just a small nudge will literally obliterate them into like atoms because of how fast he's going.
And think about it too. The clothes, they burn away.
Burn away. Naked. That's what I'm saying. They would disintegrate. They would literally disintegrate to atoms if he just even passed by them as fast as he did. So there's certain rules again in comic books, like Flash with the Speed Force. So the Speed Force is supposed to allow him to travel and not burn up or anything like that, but it's also the Speed Force allows him to travel in the real world and not affect other things around him because of that. Superman, let's say, I mean, there's a thing on how Superman is really, why he's able to be who he is, because he has like this micro, like epidermis or something like that. That's like a force field around him that allows him to be strong, and whenever he catches somebody, that force field also helps cushion the person that he carries, or if he's taking Lois Lane on a flight or something like that, that force field actually goes around her too. So there's certain like these little rules that while
So
they
you're
might
saying
sound
super condom.
there you go, man. Magnum
I
condoms.
think I think a
Super
great
Magnum.
representation of the kind of damage that would be done is in the first episode of The Boys.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly, absolutely.
A-Train just plowing, and he's just
Plowing into
poor
people.
Huey's holding a hand.
Exactly. So these are rules that that just these writers really don't know how to follow. They just don't get comic books in that sense. And even now, I think that that's what's happening with like the MCU, especially this last phase that just happened. It's just
you said it
writers.
about Raimi, and with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, he kind of got the idea, but I don't think he was familiar with the material itself.
Correct.
But he was able to give us some sort of entertaining story. Was it 100%? No, for me, but I was entertained.
Yeah,
I liked
it's just again, it was entertaining in some places, but it just, you say this makes no sense because again, they didn't follow the rules that are in the comic books when it came to Doctor Strange and how he uses magic and how he uses, how he goes into the third dimension, all these things.
And I think that's why Foggy stated the last time recently, it's quality over quantity, because they've been dishing out more and more over time.
Exactly.
Trying to get
and I have a feeling that wasn't Kevin Feige. I think that was actually Bob Iger having a small talk or a big talk with Kevin Feige and telling us like, listen, now that I'm back, we need to get back to where we were. I mean, this is garbage what you've been throwing out.
Yeah.
Now it's time for actually, good quality stuff, which I think it's the way to go. But
and I think Ant-Man's probably the last of it that we'll probably get. I think they're probably going to go back, probably retouch up the Marvels that are coming out.
The Marvels, I think, is going to be a disaster. I think that's why it got delayed all the way to November. But we'll see what happens. I mean, hey, listen, they still haven't lost money, no matter how bad they do a movie.
Even with the Eternals, they didn't lose money.
They didn't lose money at all. It's just amazing. I know that Black Adams did, but that's a whole other story for another time. I'm gonna Black Adam is gonna always be my go-to for shitty movies.
It's our new Robot Jocks.
Huh?
It's our new Robot Jocks.
Oh, that's right. Oh my God,
Robot
Jocks.
I don't remember. I remember the name. I don't think I ever saw the movie.
Do you remember? Oh,
we saw it in the theater.
Frank and I think we were in high school.
Yeah.
Yes, we were in high school, and we went and we decided to cut class that day, and we went to see Robot Jocks. And it was because I wanted to see it. He didn't even want to see it. And we sat there and saw this thing, and we're like, what the fuck have we watched? All right. I would rather get caught by a truant officer than to watch this again. It was that bad.
Wow.
That was our benchmark for bad movies for like
that was our
time.
benchmark for bad movies.
Is it as bad as Robot Jocks?
Or Highlander 2?
Here's what I would say. to that. God. Robot Jocks, at least those filmmakers didn't know any better. They just thought they had something good, and they're like, listen, it's good. This is the technology we have, and this is as good as it's going to get.
Robots.
Right. But Black Adam was arrogance. Arrogance where they thought, oh, we got the best movie in the world, and it is better than anything. And because my name is The Rock, I am the one that's going to make DC come back, and people are going to just say, oh my God, everything I do turns to gold. And that did not happen.
It's going to be a love letter to the fans.
Yes, exactly. So last person to cover. So Cody Smith McPhee as Nightcrawler. I think he did okay.
Yeah.
He was skinny enough to, be the Nightcrawler, that you always see that it was always skinny. I just felt, how do you translate Nightcrawler's real costume in in the movie.
Yeah, it was like a onesie with a red V on it that goes all the way down to his crotch.
And it had this
And he had the
right.
white gloves and the white
Yeah,
booties.
it's kind of hard to translate that, but it would be interesting to see that. But yeah, I just again, I think that's a character that needs to be CG'd, I think, more than anything else. And then Jessica Chastain as Vuk, again, that's just the wrong character to even have into this story. Although I love Jessica Chastain, but as a matter of fact, I think we'll get to that in just a moment. So, the art direction in this movie, I think, again, was bad. They were trying to emulate certain things. The Grant Morrison comic books, the costumes, they were trying to emulate that. I think Mystique and her bad makeup because she just didn't want to be in it.
Well, if you noticed, her makeup was only in her hands and her head.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Right.
They didn't.
The visor for Cyclops was just these gigantic freaking glasses. And it's like, come on, dude.
Big, huge goggles.
And I know they gave him the right visors towards the end of the movie, but I just think that should have been something that should have probably been there or something like that. The CG was just a little over the top. No Phoenix, basically, into the very last end. The image of the Phoenix was just you did it in what is it, in Apocalypse? Just show it in this. So I don't understand what that's about. I mean, that's something that I think they should have just kept throughout the entire movie. Show the Phoenix and call it the Phoenix. Did they call it the Phoenix?
No.
They basically say when they're having the party out on the lawn, which let me point out really quickly, nobody else is creeped out by the fact that Charles is like watching them on a camera with heat vision, and they're out at a party out in the woods.
So yeah. Charles was playing Mr. Creeper with the kids on the lawn.
Fucking
the kids
voyeur.
were calling her the Phoenix. No, they never actually referred to her to Phoenix, but Cyclops tells her,
oh yeah, they're calling her
you the Phoenix
because she raised from like the ashes and stuff like that. But it was never about the actual Phoenix Force, which I think it was right. And then only in the end, when she, kills Vuk or I don't know how do you pronounce that, Vuk, whatever. That's when you see a little bit of the Phoenix, and then she disappears, and then you see a little bird, like a little burning bird in the sky, which to me was just like a pigeon set on fire, So that's all it looked like. I was like, oh, okay,
Vuk, the character Vuk always, like, when you keep talking about it, I keep thinking about it now. It's like, is that a Star Trek character?
Right? That's the name of a Star Trek character. It's like, hey, meet Vuk from the planet
I'm
Vuk.
Vuk.
I'm Vuk. I am Vuk.
That's what
Jessica Chastain was like, I am Vuk. So I didn't think like the art direction was the best in this. I didn't like the costumes. I didn't like the makeup. I didn't like the choices that they did with some of the costumes. The costumes towards the end, the last part, were supposed to emulate the Jim Lee era. Well, Cyclops uniform was supposed to emulate Jim Lee's Cyclops design. But everybody else just kind of had their own. Well, you know what? The colors of Mystique were the colors that she has in the comic book, which is she has a white. Oh, she always has like this white dress kind of thing, and she's blue.
Right.
Underneath all that, so they had a blue and white thing, but I don't know about the rest.
So Jean Grey, I was that.
Well, there's no Jean Grey.
Showed up in those.
In the last scene, there's no Jean Grey.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying at the end of Apocalypse, wasn't it there where they got the uniforms?
Yeah, at the very end, they had uniforms.
Was
they were in the danger room?
Cyclops is wearing the uniform there from the Jim Lee era.
And he's got the visor.
Jean Grey actually has a approximation of the Jean Grey.
You're right. No,
actually,
you're right. You're absolutely right. So
they didn't put anything in continuity with this film from that.
Right,
literally
exactly.
What they did.
Exactly, you're right. So that makes it even worse. That at the end of that movie, you had some really great costumes, but hey, let's just put them in these crappy X, yellow X that just looks like a jumpsuit. I'm like, Guys,
Right.
all you had to do was go to the costume department and go, hey, remember those things you did for us in the last movie? We're just gonna use that. And they didn't even do that. So that was pretty bad. The
Mistakes
score
were made.
from Hans Zimmer was probably like I think Frank said it best. That was the best part of the movie.
It's true.
And it wasn't a memorable score too, because let me tell you,
It's not.
I follow Hans Zimmer all the time. To me, there's John Williams and then there's Hans Zimmer, right?
Yeah.
And once John Williams, passes on because he's almost at that age, which that's going to be a tragic day I'm going to be in mourning that for like a month.
Yeah, it's like
That
John
happens.
Williams passing.
Hans Zimmer is the one that's going to take that top spot. And honestly, his score just didn't impress me at all. And yet it was still better than the movie. So that was that's actually tragic when that happens. I mean, don't get me wrong, like Jaws helped or saved, like the theme of Jaws helped that movie, become
it did.
successful.
Yeah.
This soundtrack didn't do shit for this movie to be
It
successful
was
at
just
all.
there. But
Right.
at least it was there better than the movie itself and how it was written.
Yeah, because listen, when Jaws came out, I mean, that was first, it was over budget, it was over scheduled,
Yeah.
and they thought that Steven Spielberg would never work in this field again. And
Shark
next thing
didn't
you
work.
know, John Williams makes a score that not only helps the movie, but actually the score
Becomes an entity unto itself.
replaces the shark where the shark is not.
Right.
And that was done because, of course, the shark didn't work. So
Yeah.
that score helped
Saved
this
the
movie
movie.
become as successful. And Steven Spielberg has always said 50% of the success of this movie is a score. This one here did not do anything. All right. Because if it did, that budget of $200 million, they only made $252 million for this movie. So this was a total
Right.
wash. I mean, it was just a complete failure with them, because if the score worked, that thing would have been like $452 million, if not more. But this is where we come to the fantasy cast part of our show. So if we had to be the filmmakers ourselves, right? What would we do? What would, so let's start with the story. I personally, in my opinion, I personally think that what they should have done from the very beginning, instead, if they were going to do First Class, I think First Class should have established the original X-Men from the comic books, the way they were.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But, or even better, what they should have just done, instead of doing just First Class, what they should have done, because if they are going to get into Phoenix and they are going to get into Apocalypse, all those events had the new X-Men in it: Storm, Colossus, Wolverine, all those things. So I think they should have just said, hey, they should have just done a Professor Xavier doing the actual origin of the second X-Men.
Correct.
And then from there, build up to, at least for me, what I would have done is build up to Phoenix. I wouldn't even do Apocalypse yet, because for me, Apocalypse is still the cooler character than anybody else. So I would have built up at an event of the Phoenix. So that means that all the movies that I would have had were leading towards that. And I would have done it as close to the comic book as possible. I would have had Banshee. I would have had Colossus. Shit, I would have taken the Colossus from Deadpool and put him in there. I'm like, hey, can I just borrow that 3D model of Colossus? Because
You could actually make him younger.
you could make him a little younger, right? Exactly, and something like that. So I would have done something like that. So for me, I mean, of course, for me to do that, that means that if I went with the original story as close as possible, and don't get me wrong, I mean, there's just so much built into, like, all the stories through X-Men and how you actually build them all together. But I would have had the Shi'ar Empire. I would have had, introduced at least the Shi'ar Empire. I would have introduced other things that in the end, it just kind of coalesced to like this big event of the Phoenix, because that could have been huge if they would have done it that way. So, of course, the characters that are in this movie, which is I believe is, first of all, Mystique wouldn't have been in there because Mystique was not in the original movie. I would say, of course, Vuk is not in the movie. You know,
yeah, but you can replace that with somebody else.
well, that's what
Yeah.
you replace with Lilandra, because that was supposed to be a combination of Lilandra, the Skrulls,
Skull and the
and the
Kree.
whole Shi'ar thing. So yeah,
And
so
Shi'ar.
definitely replace her. Definitely will replace Quicksilver, because Quicksilver and Magneto were not in the original.
Mhm.
So I definitely would have done that. I mean, what do you think you guys would have done with this movie?
Hmm.
Go ahead, Mark.
Huh?
Me? Well, I would like you said before, but you could easily stretch this over 3 movies, like they should have done.
Yeah.
Which is the introduction of the new X-Men with a new Professor X.
Right.
Let's get Gary Oldman, shave him, put him in as the Professor X. Ixnay, Magneto, or if you want somebody to play Magneto as like an intern for like a short cameo, make it Alexander Skarsgård.
Right.
So he'd be perfect for that. Ixnay, Jennifer Lawrence all together as Mystique, but if she just shows up with, let's say, Magneto, just put Kristen Ritter in the part, because I'd rather see her
Yeah.
half naked.
Well,
in
we'll
blue.
get to the fan casting in just a moment. But story wise, what will you
story wise? I would say over a 3-movie arc.
Correct.
And that would be introduction of the new X-Men, like X-Men 100, or the supersized X-Men that we got, where they came into it. It could be a short little 20-minute, because you're probably going to be doing over 2 hours for this movie. Anyway,
right.
Make it the first 20 minutes. Don't put in too many credits. Just put X-Men or whatever it is. Have them go into their thing where it's what is it? Krakoa, the island of Krakoa,
Oh, yeah.
and them just they're trying to save the original X-Men. We won't cast them just yet, but they're saving the original X-Men, and they got the new X-Men there. Professor X is there with a big smile on his face. He's got his new team. Boom. They're there. They
Right.
finish the job. They go back. Then we get the whole communications from Shi'ar Empire through Professor X's dreams. He's thinking he's having nightmares, but it's literally Lilandra talking to him
Right.
through his dreams. Then it gets to that point where they have communications, blah, blah, blah. They go up there, they see the planet. He could walk, blah, blah, blah. They have to deal with certain things. There's the end of that first particular movie. We go into the second movie. We get, let's say, Jean having all these issues in space, because they're in space, her and Scott, and their love affair.
Right.
And they're having all this stuff. Colossus is doing his thing. Beast is doing his thing. We go through the steps of the comics, but not with page per page venue. And then at the very end would be like the third story would be the whole Dark Phoenix section.
Right.
So literally a build up within 3 movies to get to the Dark Phoenix saga, which we deserve, rather than hold on, we got like 2.5 hours. We could throw all this crap into this movie and see what they did. Hold on. You did your homework, right? Yeah, I read those. You gave me like 3 graphic novels with everything in it. Did you read it? Yeah, I read it. Did you understand it? Yeah, I read it. Did you understand it? Yeah, I read it.
Yeah, well, I read
here's
it.
Here's my screenplay. All right, send me another copy. I'll just take out this character, take out that scene. Okay. Yeah, I read it. And that's
Exactly.
literally how they are doing that with these screenwriters. And there's no depth, there's no passion in it. A lot of fans have said it to Kevin Smith. A lot of fans have said it to Stan Lee when he was alive. We need to have somebody who has that devoted fandom for the comic to write the script in the screenplay.
Somebody who's a fan of the IP. Somebody who's a fan and respects the
it.
IP.
Yeah.
I've always said that. Respect the fucking IP.
Yeah.
Always. I'm gonna get a t-shirt. Respect the fucking IP. People are gonna be like, what does that mean? You'll find out one day. but goddamn it, respect the IP.
Yeah.
You know, so
Absolutely.
Frank, what will you do? What would be your version of it?
Yeah. Let us know, Frank.
Well, we already talked a little bit about this. Okay, so I'd already said we actually probably could have saved it if we'd had done a little bit more continuity between X-Men Apocalypse, even though it sucked,
Right.
X-Men Apocalypse, and carrying it over into this one. So what I was saying was, we have this power that finds Jean Grey, attaches itself to her. She's already got the Phoenix Force in her, so that's done, right? But she becomes this threat because of the distrust of the students that are around her.
Right.
The distrust of her father would push her even further because they could have that section where she finds out that and a big thing that's ruined Xavier in this one is his motivation. He takes those memories of her killing her mother and suppresses that and makes it where she thinks she killed her entire family, making it actually even worse.
Yeah.
Because at least then you could say, yeah, I killed my mom, but at least my dad's still alive.
But that sounds like something out of Logan.
That's
exactly.
50-50. So the fact that he did that makes him look like a jerk. But you could say, all right, she goes and she starts feeling to herself that she's changing, she's becoming this growing threat. And who do you go to that you know of who's that kind of a person? Magneto. She goes to Magneto, and at that point, we could actually have Magneto pull some really evil crap. Just be like, you know what? Your power is growing exponentially. And in the back of his mind, he's like, I can use that. You know what I mean? Like, he corrupts her even further, has her do something. I would say, like, we take out a city. Chicago, gone.
Damn, why you pick Chicago? You did that very quickly, Chicago.
He's got a thing for Chicago. He doesn't like it.
Why not? It's in the middle of nowhere. It's like Illinois, you know. Anybody from Chicago, I got mad respect for it, but this is us doing our thing.
He just wants to destroy Chicago, I think.
I just got something
So
against
she destroys a full city.
Yeah, a full city. There we go. Okay.
She destroys a full city.
As he backpedals from Chicago.
Hey.
Okay.
So she destroys a full city. With Magneto like prodding her on.
Right.
And even he starts to see that, well, wait a minute, I think I went a little bit too far with this. So now he's got to go ahead and bring in the X-Men to have them help him fight. And then you could actually have that last scene of the train, which was all a reshoot, was not supposed to be in the original film.
I know.
That last scene in the chain where she is been captured by the government, still going to be taken away, but it was done with the help of the X-Men and Magneto. And now they've got to save her because now they're like, well, we don't know what the government's going to do with her. At the end, she becomes Phoenix. Again, realizes in her head that she's a threat and sacrifices her life, much like she did in comics.
Right. All right. I mean, you know, as I thought about it, my thought is like, well, you know, if we're going to make this a super huge event, instead of 3 movies, I'll probably stretch it out to maybe 6 movies or whatever it is.
Yeah, you do the whole Phoenix saga very beginning for 3 and then do the Dark Phoenix.
I mean, you could do
3.
right, exactly. So I would do like the first movie would definitely be the introduction of the new X-Men. And you could even have Magneto there, but Magneto gets either defeated or something like that. That could be the bad guy for that. I think like they've done with the MCU, have maybe certain either origins or certain like they did. So I would definitely have one movie follow just almost panel to panel the Wolverine from Frank Miller. So that would be just such a great movie that way. And they try to do it, but it was just all of a sudden like Silver Samurai was
they had to have some villain in that particular movie.
Yeah,
I don't hate that movie. A lot of people do.
I don't
still
hate
think
it.
better than the first.
Yes, but I
Wolverine
just think that
Origins.
Silver Samurai was always a person,
Yes.
a character, a human character, with I think adamantium armor,
Yes.
as opposed to it being a robot.
Well, it's far better than the Rhino we got in Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh my god, yeah, you're right.
Touche.
Honestly, I would prefer the idea of how they gave us the Silver Samurai
Right.
than the Rhino that we got.
Yeah. But I would do that. So I would do that. I would do probably, have at least one movie goes towards that. I would have maybe another movie that would probably get it a little bit into origins of like maybe Cyclops and his brother Havoc.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Or like the origin story, like a small flashback moment.
Yeah, something like that in there. So, but stretch out, I would stretch out, hey, how she becomes the Phoenix, which we all know that, later on, the Phoenix was not really Jean Grey. Jean Grey was really, that was just a,
Jean Grey was just
clone.
a vessel for the
It was basically
Phoenix.
a clone of Jean Grey, and Jean Grey was like, I guess, hibernating in some big egg or whatever it is underneath the water. So, but that would actually be a really cool thing to kind of almost hint at, where people would be like, wait, what's going on here? And then introduce the Hellfire Club, then maybe have like what I would say an adventure in space with like, the Starjammers. Bring in the Starjammers, and that would be that would be basically the Guardians of the Galaxy of the X-Men. So you could do something like that with the Starjammers. You could show the Shi'ar Empire. Hell, you can even hint at the New Mutants, and then kind of all start leading into the Hellfire Club, basically corrupting Jean. And how all of a sudden the Dark Phoenix and you could actually, like, if you stretch that out into 10 movies, honestly, and then you have the last movie all of a sudden become a huge event where this thing is not just affecting a town the way this one is, but it's actually affecting the world and, I don't know, the entire galaxy if it has to. That will be phenomenal, like, doing it that way. But that's, Fox would have to have vision, and they would have to have writers that actually kind of, understood the material, which apparently they don't. So,
let me interject here right now.
And I'm not calling out any, how can I say?
City?
No, I'm not calling out any talent that did this. I mean, even though people could look it up and see who really fucked this up.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that if they had, I would say, faith in what they were doing, and they had the right people, and they had the one visionary that could say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start here. Our end goal is going to be here, and we're going to have the audience follow us through all of this. And it's not just going to be like, hey, let's just make money off of this movie and this movie. We're going to tease them all the way to the very end, because in the end, just like they did with Avengers, where you saw Thanos and people went, as soon as people saw Thanos, people went, oh, fuck.
They knew exactly what they were getting into.
I think we know what we're getting. And they didn't say that we were getting the Infinity saga, no. But people thought about it. People was like, this, I think, is going to be the Infinity Stones
saga. Yeah,
right. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. But fuck, it took what, 10 movies? No, it took
10 years.
It took 10 years to do that. Something like that.
If you think about it, literally between the time of Iron Man 1 to the point of Endgame, it was 10 years.
It was 10 years. But that was how many movies? Like 20 movies or something like that?
Over 22 or 23
Yeah, over
movies.
22 movies. So they don't need to go that far, but they took us on that ride all the way to the end, where you were like, when you saw Endgame, you were like, that's the most perfect movie in the world, period.
Yes. Yeah, because they built up to that, and they grew the affection of every Marvel superhero and villain
Correct.
in there, and we were able to get a full rounded story like a novel or
Absolutely.
a version of novels. Now, anybody listening right now, any thoughts, materials, and ideas that come out of this particular podcast, whether you're a screenwriter, a producer, or director, everything is copywritten Robert Moda for Fantasy Picks Movie Edition. So if you try to steal these are copywritten. So we'll move on.
We'll move on. All right. So
You did snap on us.
I know, man.
I
Vicious.
got the power.
So if I'm going to redo these movies to make it better and stuff like that, who would I pick as actors? Right. So for me, starting with Professor X,
Should we alternate?
we'll alternate. I mean, okay, Mark,
Character by character.
who would you pick as Professor X in your movies?
All right, I have two. Actually, there's like four, but I have top two that I want. A lot of people want Giancarlo Esposito to play Professor X, and that's what's been talked about.
Right.
My thoughts would either be Bryan Cranston, because we already seen him bald anyway in Breaking Bad,
Correct.
and he can play an evil bastard or a nice guy, or Gary Oldman, and Gary Oldman's played bald before as well,
That is true.
and he was evil, but I think, with the depth that we get out of Gary Oldman, I think he could definitely play a good Charles Xavier at his age. You know, he's close to 60 now, so
Right. So Gary Oldman would be your Professor
top pick.
X.
Yeah.
Your top pick. How about you, Frank?
I actually feel like McAvoy didn't do a bad job. I didn't, in my thing, change him. I think the writing was what failed him.
Right.
Plus the motivation. Like I said, the motivation makes him look like a jerk.
Right.
So
Well, let's say McAvoy wasn't available. Let's say McAvoy wasn't available. Right. Because that's what we do. We're replacing everybody. It's like across the board. So who would you think would make your Professor X?
Good question. Let's see.
Do, 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 do. So while you're thinking about that, so
Yeah,
I came up with like 8 different people that I was like, all right, who do I? And one of them was Bryan Cranston. The other one, Jeremy Irons, I think actually, but I never seen him shave bald. But I think he also has kind of like this.
That's because we've seen him. We've seen as Alfred. So
exactly. So I think Stanley Tucci, who is bald.
That was somebody on my list too.
Right.
Okay.
So that was one on the list. Colin Firth, I think, is also a great.
What about Ray Fiennes?
Ray Fiennes is also another one, but I didn't have him. I had him on something else. I'd also had Gary Oldman, Lance Reddick, also great. I think for that. Possibly Jude Law, maybe. I don't know. But
well, he's older now.
But my number one, honestly, Mark Strong.
Oh, okay.
I like that.
Yeah, Mark Strong would be my number one for Professor X. So how about you, Frank?
All right. I got my Professor X.
Okay.
And it's an actor he's very much into genre stuff, but he's highly underrated.
Okay.
William Sadler.
William?
Oh, Bill Sadler? Holy crap.
Bill Sadler.
Sadler.
Shawshank Redemption, The Mist.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he's a great actor. Actually, he's a local. Rob, by the way, he lives in Connecticut.
He does. Okay.
Nice.
Huh. Yeah, no,
I met
that's
him a few times. He's a nice guy too. But yeah, I could see that too.
All right. So our next character, Wolverine. Now we all know that it's very hard to replace Hugh Jackman. And let me tell you, Hugh Jackman, when we first heard that Hugh Jackman was going to be Wolverine, we were like, what? Who the hell is this guy? And next thing you know, now it's like nobody can replace him.
Yeah.
But that being said, we said the same thing about Christian Bale being Batman.
Mhm.
And we said the same thing about, Michael Keaton being Batman. And then Ben Affleck came and people were like, Ben Affleck, ugh. and now Ben Affleck is like so beloved as Batman also.
That's my favorite Batman.
That's my favorite Batman too. Trust me. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying that some people criticized it just because of that. But in the past, there've been several people that have been put out there to see who would actually be a good Wolverine.
Danny DeVito.
He was actually considered at one point. That's what's really sad.
No, because it works in the benefit because Danny DeVito is really short and
right.
Wolverine's supposed to be like 5'1", maybe.
Yeah, something like
stocky,
that. Yeah.
And he's like so heavy, and full of grizzle and smelly. So I think it would work.
What gets to me is that when you look at him in the comic books, they draw him so proportional that you never see him as short, right? And two, he's such a badass that you never think that. But when you see him in film with like Hugh Jackman, who's 6'3" or something like that, it works. Because if you put somebody short, you're like, no, dude, no. Right? So, but
I already have a couple of ideas for him now.
Go ahead. Which is yours, Mark?
Well, we could go with the first one, which would be the original person that was supposed to play Wolverine. That would be Dougray Scott.
Okay.
But he couldn't do it contractually because of Mission Impossible 2.
Okay.
And he was the evil guy in Mission Impossible 2. He came back in Fear the Walking Dead most recently years as the lover to one of the characters
okay.
on that show. But he's a very reputable actor, and I think he would have been perfect. He had the kind of grizzled look.
Right.
In comparison to if you look at a young Hugh Jackman, he's too cute, too clean. I think Dougray Scott would have worked. For modern reasons, I would say Harry Potter himself,
Daniel Radcliffe.
Radcliffe.
I know they've been considering him, or it's been fan casting. I think more.
Years ago, people would fan cast him as that.
Yeah.
There's a movie that was called Horns. He was in that.
Right.
And I think it would have been perfect like
Swiss
that.
Army Man.
Cool.
Well,
Which he does nothing.
What about you,
Mostly
Frank?
dead in that one, but
you're talking about what was that? Swiss Army Man? Is that what you said?
Swiss Army Man, yeah.
Yeah, that was a great movie too. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go with one. Taron Egerton.
Who
did the Kingsman?
Yep.
I barely heard you. What was that?
It's Taron Egerton.
I don't know. It could work. I mean,
he was in the Kingsman.
Yeah, no, it could work.
He was very good in that.
No, he's great in that.
Yeah. Well, so whatever. Carl Urban from I think he would be great.
From The Boys, yeah.
Yeah, from The Boys. I think he would be
was already in
phenomenal. Yeah, exactly. But
right.
So I would love to see Keanu Reeves do this. The problem is Keanu Reeves will never, I think, bulk up for a part like this. Maybe he would. I don't know. But I just don't know if he has a grizzled look. I just don't know if he would be that. But my number one, honestly, take him away from DC, Jason Momoa.
Yeah. But he's too I have a problem with Jason Momoa. I love him as a character actor and I love what he does. And as a person, he's pretty nice, apparently.
Right.
But I think he's way too big. I don't know why.
Well, I mean, he's what, 6'5" or something like that?
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman is 6'3", 2 inches bigger. Oh, well, so who cares?
I'd rather see him
and nowadays
as something else.
Actually scale him down.
That is true.
Yeah, nowadays you could scale him down. It's like, all right, if we could de-age of people, we could actually,
a little bit.
shorten him a little. I mean, he's one that
they did that with Natalie Portman. Okay,
like out of all these characters, out of all these actors, he would be the one to say, you know what, I'm gonna look like a brick shit house, right? And he would do it, but
You just took my Beast character.
well, yeah, he could be your Beast. I got other people for Beast. So here's an interesting one. So if we went with Colossus,
Yeah.
would you guys feel that? I think for me, Colossus will always be CG, like they
Yes,
did
he would.
in,
Yes.
in Deadpool.
In
He
Deadpool.
never transformed to his human self. So if I did that, who will you think will voice him?
Oh wow, there's so many people that you
Because
can
honestly,
do.
I think the original guy from Deadpool, I forgot what his name is, but I think he would be great. I would just keep him.
Oh man, I'm trying to think.
But if I had to have a real person, John
Manganiello?
Manganiello will probably be my Colossus.
I love him as a character actor. I loved him as our Deadshot that we were supposed to. Was it Deadshot in DC that you were supposed to play, or was it? I forget it. Deathstroke.
Deathstroke.
I thought it was
Deathstroke. He actually did a really good job.
He did a great job in that, but to me, it's like voice wise. Oh, who played Juggernaut in Last Stand?
My God. I know who you're talking about.
He's in all the Guy Ritchie movies.
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch.
Yeah. He's in the Guy Ritchie movies all the time. He was actually the lead in Manchester United,
right?
That soccer team. But I would have him.
Okay.
Because I think he could actually pull off the accent German, because a lot of English people.
Well, it's supposed to be Russian, but
oh really?
Oh, that's what Colossus. Yeah, Colossus is Russian.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I forgot it. Yeah, and then of course, he's got a sister, Ilyana Rasputin.
Right. So actually, the person who portrayed the voice for Deadpool, his name is Stefan Kapikic, something like that. Who is I thought he was great in that. I don't know, but that would be the great voice. How about Cyclops? Oh well, Frank, you didn't say anything about Colossus. Yes. Who were you?
So I'm going to go with somebody who I was watching a documentary the other day, and I was like, young Kevin Nash.
Kevin Nash is a WWE wrestler who played. He was Diesel.
Oh, yes, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
he would be a very good shit. All you got to do is fucking just spray paint him in silver and he'll be fine.
Yeah, I know, but he's older now.
Save yourself a lot of money in CG.
He's still in good shape though.
Yeah, he's in great shape too.
He
the person I was thinking of voicing it was Vinnie Jones too. Everybody, so
Vinnie Jones, that's it. Yeah,
there you go. No, that's pretty good. All right, so Cyclops. Who would be your Cyclops? Leader of the X-Men, the one who is a master tactician, and when it comes to All
right, I have to go with a pretty boy on this one.
Who?
Zac Efron.
Zac Efron, nice. Really?
Yeah, because he's got the look, and he could get the physicality as far as the muscle. Because if you ever watched the movie Baywatch, he has the physicality.
Yeah.
And I think if you give him a chance, he could actually do the physicality and do the punching now. Because if you actually portray Cyclops as what he is, because he is a combatant physically, he knows how to punch, he knows how to get into that. I think Zach could give a great shot at it. And I think acting skills wise, I think he actually could pull it off as well.
Okay. How about you, Frank?
I have. If you've seen Love and Monsters, Dylan O'Brien.
Love and Monsters, Dylan O'Brien.
I like that.
I can't see him do that.
Oh, it's a fan cast.
Yeah, well, this is your fan casting. So here's mine. Mine would be Chris Pine.
All right.
Chris Pine, a younger Chris Pine.
A younger Chris Pine, right?
Yeah. No, exactly. But I think Chris Pine would be, pretty good on that. All right, so Jean Grey. Who would be a Jean Grey? Your red-headed fiery bird.
Well, the cool thing about Hollywood, they could dye your hair, especially with women, because
True.
women aren't prone to hair loss as much as men are due to dyeing. I would definitely go with Samara Weaving.
Okay,
I like it.
I like it. And you, Frank?
So I actually had, and I'm gonna butcher her name, but Saoirse Ronan. She's a great actress.
She's got a great ass. What?
Did you?
No,
Wow! Holy
she's a great actress.
wow!
Oh,
Ooh.
My hearing's going.
Uh-huh. If you need to write to Mark Kirkman,
No, once again,
he was born in the Bronx.
The feelings of Mark Kirkman do not reflect those of the podcast.
You know that she was born in the Bronx?
I did, yes.
That's awesome. The Boogie Down Bronx. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna have to look out for her. Oh, she was in Lady Bird.
Yes.
Yes, I know who you're talking about now.
Yeah.
So
You know
here's my thought. My thought it's either I
A lot of
actually
people don't know. Yeah.
yeah, I actually thought of Bryce Dallas Howard. You know, because she has that, you know,
She's a little older for the character, but in her the woman
young,
from
yeah.
The Water or whatever it was,
Yeah,
way back
exactly.
when M. Night Shyamalan,
yeah.
Shyamalan,
Even now, she looks fantastic. But
Yeah.
honestly, the same redhead that came out in the goddamn movie, Jessica
Jessica
Chastain, I
Chastain,
think
'cause-
she would be great as Jean Grey.
as an older Jean Grey, I think too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, but I think she would be great for that. I mean, look, when I pick a character, I mean, I'm just looking at what their body of work and what they've done, whether they're young or old. I could care less.
We
I
could
mean,
de-age them in the movies.
there's
now,
always
everybody.
de-aging if they really have to do that, but can they carry? I think I think an actress of her caliber can carry this character from
Yeah.
her being discovered all the way to going through the transformation of Phoenix to Dark Phoenix and everything in between. I think that she has a lot of gravitas when it comes to that.
That is true.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm
Beast.
actually going to throw in a bonus.
Okay, go ahead.
Hold on. Let me do a bonus for Jean Grey,
Okay.
mainly because I saw this picture the other day. So if you watch Stranger Things, Sadie Sink,
The
Yeah,
girl,
a young-
the
young-
redhead girl?
Yeah. I think
yeah,
Sadie Sink
they
could do
did
it.
actually a picture of her as Jean Grey.
That
Did
is
they?
true.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I just think that she's still not I'd rather go for an actor who is really an actor. I'm not saying that she's not. Don't get me wrong. I just think that just Jessica Chastain is just has a much broader, whatever you want to call it, as an actress than she does. This girl's young. I mean, she's still developing as an actress and still trying to, develop her craft. I think Jessica Chastain has some time to do that, where she could just really carry the different emotional levels that that the character Jean Grey will go through all the way to the end. But no, I mean, I think as a young Jean Grey, she would be great.
Yeah, definitely like a little
But
kid
as an
version.
older version, as her going through the whole thing, that I don't see it. But I mean, she was great. She was great in Stranger Things.
Yeah.
So, all right, next one is Beast. Who would we have as Beast?
All right, I'll give you mine.
Okay,
Get it. He's not the super jack person that we would look for as far as body wise, but I
okay.
think he's good as an actor. Tanner Buchanan. If you watch
You're going,
Cobra Kai,
it's funny because you're going for all these really young actors.
I am.
Yeah, you're going for all these young actors. I'm going. I'm going for.
Older and mid.
I'm going more for well-established bodies of work when it comes to actors, I guess. That
Or
I
you
think
could go young too. He's going young, which is
He-
fine.
right,
too.
which is fine. No, and that is quite fine. I think, what have I seen him in? That's the one thing I'm looking at. Oh, he was in
You haven't
Cobra
watched
Kai.
Cobra Kai?
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He's Robbie.
You would think him as Beast?
Yeah.
Okay. And how about you?
He's very athletic,
Right.
and he's not a bad actor.
Okay.
All right.
How about you, Mark?
I have two. They're a little bit older. I'm leaning more towards my second of them, but probably Kevin Durand. And Kevin Durand,
Yeah.
you would remember as Blob in
This
X-Men Origins Wolverine. And he's been in a whole
Oh,
bunch
I
of
know who you're talking about. Okay.
yeah.
All right. Mine. So since I, like I was saying, so since I would on my X-Men, I think I will make Beast all CG. I think the person to voice him would be Ian McGregor. Just to voice him, not to.
Ewan McGregor. Yeah, I would say that too. Yeah, Ewan
Yeah.
McGregor would be perfect
Ewan
as a
McGregor
voice
has
of a CG
just
character.
the voice or something like that. That's at least for me who I would probably do.
I would have gone Liam Neeson for the voice of Beast, but that's just me. Maybe I'm just going with
Liam Neeson
Qui-Gon.
is bad. Liam Neeson is actually good. I think Liam Neeson has that voice that can actually carry that too.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Storm. Who will we do, Storm?
I have one on the go already.
Go for it.
Savoy Brown, who we've seen in the Scream movies so far, as well as Yellow Jackets as Thaisa Brown.
Okay. Good choice. Good choice. You,
Young.
sir?
so mine would be Jessica Parker Kennedy.
That's not bad. Mine would be one of two. Either Rosario Dawson or Zoe Kravitz.
I would probably pick Zoe Kravitz out of both of those.
So I think Zoe
I think
Kravitz
she would nail it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Zoe Kravitz would do. I mean, because I got to picture them with white hair.
Or you could go with her mom. You could go with Zoe Kravitz's mom
Yeah. I mean,
for an older version of Aurora Storm.
yeah. Tessa Thompson would not be bad either on that.
Oh, forget it.
That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Tessa Thompson, I think, will also be great on that. So, and Kerry Washington too. But yeah, no, but my pick will be probably Zoe Kravitz on that. Nightcrawler.
Nightcrawler.
I'll give you mine.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
From Dune, Timothy Chalamet.
Shit.
That's such a
I
good
thought
one.
the same thing.
I kind of thought that too as well.
I
but,
thought the same thing.
yeah.
But go ahead, Mark.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I have to go with a Skarsgård. I have to go with Bill because he's lanky.
Bill.
Okay.
The
Well,
younger
again,
brother.
I think that, I would make him CG personally, but that's just me.
But he could still voice it.
And if
yeah.
this character was still alive, I would probably pick him.
Being the Merciless. And so
Anton Yelchin.
Anton
okay.
is so
Yeah,
he was so talented.
Yes.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
He is so talented.
Yeah.
If he would have been alive, boom, he's the guy that I would want to
Yeah.
do that. I think he could have done a really good job on that. All right, the last two are going to be Sebastian Shaw.
Sebastian Shaw.
Sebastian Shaw.
But he was an older man, everybody. So
He's an older man, so there's a lot that could go here, and there's a lot great actors that I think could do that.
What do you have, Rob? Do you have anybody in mind?
Yes, I do have a few people in mind. So, fuck, I came out with 8 people in mind because I was like, all 8 of them would be great.
8?
Yeah, I got like 8 here. Like, let me tell you, I have like almost 8 on all of them. And I'm just like looking at them, and because I feel differently every time I look at one. But then that's why, and I say, okay, this one is my final one. But so I thought, okay, Sebastian Shaw could be either played by John Hamm,
Okay.
right?
I'm thinking more comic book character and way he looks and presents.
Jeremy Irons.
Yep.
Brad Pitt could be one, possibly. George Clooney's the other one. But probably I would pick Colin Firth for that part. That's just me.
Firth. All right.
How about you guys?
All right, I got Toby Stevens.
Kobe
who was in the
Stevens.
recent Lost in Space.
Oh,
Father.
yes, he's actually, yeah, he could be good. I mean, he's definitely a ginger, but I mean, we just have to like, grease his hair black. But sure,
Hmm.
he's actually pretty good. How about you, Mark?
I have at least three going on for me. One would be Sam Trammell. He's an Australian actor, but I think he could
Okay.
pull off the look of what we know classically from the Sebastian Shaw, but he's not as big.
Okay,
You remember him as Sam Merlot in True Blood. I've been
right.
on a True Blood fix, so a lot of the actors are in my head. But uh, Liev Schreiber.
Yeah.
Okay. The problem with
We
Liev Schreiber is that he's well, I mean, look, for Sabretooth, he didn't want to wear the wig and he did not want to.
we're not talking about what he's gonna do with it.
Well, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
Liev Schreiber,
What I'm saying.
might say, listen, you're gonna take me as I look. I am not gonna get the black hair with the ponytail. It's not gonna happen.
Well, it's
So
also grayish too, if you think about it.
So I'm just letting you know your casting problems here. You're gonna have to cater to this man, and he might actually be very difficult. So gonna have to go to the
You can win
trailer,
him over.
give
You
him a.
just tell him.
Gonna have to go
Just
to
tell
the
him Kevin
trailer, give
Bacon
him a
paid.
little handy or something, just so he could actually calm down and come to the set.
Oh, well, my final thought would be he's a lot older. We
Uh-huh.
all know him from like X-Men style movies. Danny Huston,
Danny
who played
Huston.
William
Okay, yeah.
Stryker. And he's got
yes. Oh
Yes.
my God, yes. Actually, a
He was
little
also the
bit
head vampire in 30 Days of Night.
right, a little bit younger.
Yep.
But yes, I think he will do very good on that.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. The last one is going to be Emma Frost. Now, keep in mind that Emma Frost is drawn in the comic books in a very provocative way.
Oh yeah. Likes to get naked a lot too.
Correct. Who do you think not only is the person phenomenally in shape, but can actually have the acting chops to pull her off?
I got one.
Go for it.
Her name is Ruby O'Fee, and
Ruby-
you have seen her in Army of Thieves. If you watched Army of Thieves,
Oh yeah.
Ruby O'Fee?
Yeah.
yeah, and she actually shows up in there in a blonde wig, looking hot as hell
Awesome.
in that movie.
Okay. Very good. What's yours, sir?
For me, I'm torn between two. We're talking Emma Frost, right?
Yep.
She's a bit short, but I loved her in Big Bang Theory. Melissa Rauch. I
Nice.
think she,
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
as perky as she looks, but she has the look of Emma if she dyes her hair really
yeah.
blonde, and
Are
she
you-
can put
are-
off.
Is
Evil.
it because Emma Roche is very voluptuous?
Well, that too, but
That
my next step, not as voluptuous, but we've seen her a lot naked in Westworld. Evan Rachel Wood.
Okay. Very good. All right. So I got two. Actually, I picked out 9, but I got 2 here that I'm going to narrow it down to.
You keep cheating. I'm just saying.
No, I'm not cheating. I'm just saying that I got 9, but for me to pick
9?
one. So I'm torn between 2 of them. One of them, Margot Robbie,
Okay.
Yeah.
because she is sexy as hell. She plays sexy and has a wide range in acting. I think she would do very good.
She plays
The-
sexy and smart.
Yes. I mean, shit. Come on.
Well, she is smart. Come on.
Yes, she's very smart. So, but the other one who can play, I think, not only sexy, but cunning, which is what Emma Frost is.
Right.
Charlize Theron.
That is true.
The thing is, Charlize Theron does not have, I would say, the ample,
Voluptuous.
that the character is actually, in. But that being said, I would still think her in that role would be excellent because she could play very cold and calculating.
Yes.
I
Well,
mean,
we
we've
already
seen
seen that at the end of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
true. I
Right.
mean, and with a really horrible
Leo.
wig. I mean, that was a horrible.
It was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I landed
Okay.
on these. I think like Margot Robbie, yes, because of course she's. I'm not going to say she's the flavor of the month. I mean, she's a very talented, amazingly talented actress, but she's so popular now the way she, and she is in so many
She is
movies.
super popular, but
Right.
she's obviously earned it.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that she hasn't. I mean, besides her beauty, which she is phenomenally beautiful, her talents are equally, if not better than that. So I think that's great.
Right.
But I also like Charlize Theron because, especially when you see her throughout her career, she has played so many different things. But when it comes to being that, she's played almost an Emma Frost type of character in different, things. And I think that she will also be great. So my pick is going to probably be Charlize Theron on that.
Awesome.
So. All righty. So yeah. So I mean, the only one that I did not put in here was Banshee. And I forgot to do that one, but I wouldn't even know who the hell to pick for Banshee. I mean,
I already have one.
I'll probably put what's his name? Colin Farrell. He's Irish already.
That's true, but honestly, Jason Statham with a wig.
Oh Jesus.
All right, I got it.
Okay.
He's English, but he can do an Irish accent
That's good.
Yeah.
because he's got the attitude. And I think for Banshee, because Banshee had a lot of attitude.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, so that's actually our picks for Dark Phoenix out there. Again, this is a movie that was highly flawed. There was a movie that people thought that, it was going to be the last hurrah for Fox because it was the last movie that
Not
Fox
necessarily.
no,
New Mutants.
no, meaning for X-Men, it was the
okay.
last one.
All right.
Because they already at this point they already knew that Disney was about to probably buy them, or so they knew that they were going to
And that's
go
why
out.
they had to get it out there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
they had to
they
get it
kind
out
of
there, get whatever money they can.
correct. So they were trying to go out with a bang, and they actually went out with a whimper because it just was not. And even Chris Claremont, I mean, even though he is credited to be in this, I mean, I think he said that not exactly what it should have been.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a movie that was highly flawed. A movie that honestly just didn't live up to I think what the X-Men could possibly be, and we're hoping that the MCU is going to do a much better job. I think what the MCU is doing is, in a way, is kind of smart. They're not putting the X-Men in there yet because they're going to try to exhaust everything they can with the Avengers.
Yes.
And then go into the X-Men, which has so many different stories. So that's going to fucking carry them for another 10 years. And same thing with Fantastic Four, so Fantastic Four also has a ton of, almost Avenger level events, but now, with you could do Galactus, you could do so many different things with Fantastic Four. Same thing with the X-Men. So I think I'm hoping to see something great coming out of them. So, but this is our little filmmaking ideas. Not that they're any better than they are, but as we said, we're playing filmmaker here, and we're just doing our fantasy cast there. So, for all of you out there, let us know, who do you think had probably the better ideas of it? Was it Mark? Was it Frank? Was it me? Or give us your version of who would you cast in these roles? Maybe they're better than ours and stuff. And and if they
what's
are,
your fantasy cast?
Yeah, what's your fantasy cast? And let us know. I mean, we'll mention it on the podcast. So this is pretty much the end of our episode. I know it went over a little bit more than it should, but let us know what you think. Mark, where could they find you very quickly?
Very quickly, you can find me on Panels to Pixels podcast. That can be found on any player of choice. We cover very much like what Rob and us just covered just now. It's about comics adapted to movies and what we think. Coming up, Quantum Mania, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Robin I will be on there as well as my buddy Steve Brown. I also do Adrenaline Cinema podcast, and that can be found on the Powercore Entertainment Network as well. And there we cover anything action, adventure, fantasy, all that cool stuff. Coming up, you could hear, of all things, Cocaine Bear.
Ah,
So-
there we go. Awesome. And Frank, I know that you don't have a podcast. This is basically the only one you have right now. But you know,
that's where you can find me, right here.
It is where they can find you, right here.
Yeah. And Frank's always welcome on my podcast as well if you want.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for being on the podcast, and I want to thank everybody out there for listening and hanging on, hanging in there with us. So, thank you, and have a good day. And we'll see you next time.
Nanu.
All right, we're out of here.